Good morning, folks. It is Tuesday, November 10th, and this is your recorded lesson to begin the process of learning about the Southern Colonies and starting to do the Southern Colonies Notes Organizer. So really quickly, going to get you on a present mode, and I want to try to be as brief as I can, but at the same time, I want to really kind of guide you through the process. Obviously, having this begin on an asynchronous day was not ideal. The digital textbook not working was not ideal either. So what you're going to see here is I have not yet posted this day 3 lesson plan, but that will be active and live for you. This is where you're getting not only the lesson plan for the day, which is popping up right now. We are going to be covering the settlement in Jamestown material, which is going to be pages 68 to 70 in your text. Obviously, if the link is working on the notes, which I will attempt to do as we begin this process today, great. If not, then I will have a digital PDF of the textbook pages, the hard copy that Mr. Wonger and I posted. So today our main objective is to get you guys through the settlement in Jamestown and kind of show you how the notes organizer should start to look. You can certainly follow along and really kind of just pause this video and type in some things into your doc as well as we're reading and following along. Obviously, this would be better served if we were live, and we certainly can do this during office hours as well. Be more than happy to work with people. Although I expect I'll probably be having a fair amount of people trying to, if the book starts to work, being able to do their scavenger hunt as well. That word's been struggling all day with that word. All right, so students should be able to follow along, kind of follow through the notes organizer. We are changing the due date for this Southern Colonies Notes Organizer to Friday the 13th. That's this Friday. We plan on having you do a certain amount today, the settlement in Jamestown, a certain amount tomorrow, which you'll see in tomorrow's video, and then we're going to kind of bring everything together in on Thursday, try to get a little bit more progress and try to wrap these up by Friday at the beginning of, or in the middle of class sometime. And then we'll start moving into New England colonies as well. So now that you know where your lesson plan is, I'm going to click off of there. You're going to also notice that we posted the HMH Southern Colonies digital text as well. And that is going to be right here. You're going to see me pop back and forth between those. I'm going to click out of there for now. That is a fallback plan if our notes organizer link does not work. So in order to get to your notes organizer, remember that is actually posted as, why is this not working? It's posted down here on your day 2, which is what we talked about on Monday. So for the 2 of you that turned it in first hour, you're going to have to unsubmit that. There was nothing for you to turn in at this point. You haven't started anything. So you're going to click on your rows, Southern Colonies, and that's going to take you to this notes organizer. So in order to access that, those of you that turned it in already, you guys are going to have to unsubmit. All right, now the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to take a look at what we need to have done. So we're going to be on page 68. That is, and I also posted the HMH here. We're going to be starting on page 68, the settlement in Jamestown, and we're going to be working today through page 70, which is, or into page 70, which is the beginning of daily life in Virginia. So you're going to see that that is going to take us, we're going to do 68, this little small segment in 69, and then this little small chunk at the top, of page 70 as well. So we're going to take it down through here until we get to the daily life in Virginia. That's the plan for today. Now, the things we're looking for are geographic characteristics, economic characteristics, social, and political. And we're actually going to also find that the stuff about Jamestown is going to come out here in question 2. How did John Smith improve conditions at Jamestown? And we're also going to find that there's another question specifically kind of related to Jamestown down here. Jamestown failed to make a profit until John Rolfe introduced a new type of blank that sold. So we're going to be looking to answer these 2 questions as well, which both can end up becoming information that fits into these notes as well. Okay. So let's get started with the process. Now that we know kind of what we're looking for, we're going to start with the top here. It says the Southern Colonies. And if you were there, this is what the HMH series does, is they do the if you were there kind of component at the beginning of most sections. So they call their sections lessons. That's the one big difference from the old text that we had to this one. Says a year ago in 1609, you moved to the colony of Virginia. Life has been hard. Life here has been hard. During the winter, many people died of cold or sickness. Food is always scarce. Now it's spring, and a ship has come from England, bringing supplies. Bringing supplies. In a week, it will sail home. Some of your neighbors are giving up and returning to England. They ask you to come too. And then they want you to internalize and just kind of think to yourself, if you were in that situation with food being scarce, supplies not really coming, and a ship that would have offered you an opportunity for passage back, would you take the ship back, or would you try to fight your way through the challenges with the rest of the people that stayed back in Jamestown? One of the things that you need to understand before we start the reading is that Jamestown was the first successful English settlement in the New World. And they had attempted to do this back in 1585 with a settlement called Roanoke. Roanoke was a disaster. It fell apart. It failed, not just once, but twice. The people there, the second trip to Roanoke, all the way down in North Carolina, it's kind of like the border between South and North Carolina, was like a little island. Those people disappeared off the face of the earth, never to be found again, and not really knowing exactly what happened to them. So it's going to be about 20 plus years later that you're going to see an attempt to come back and try settling in the New World for England another time. And of course, as we know, this is going to be successful. So the real trick here is to understand its success and how it's going to start opening the doors up for others settling into the Southern colonies as well. So settlement in Jamestown. In 1605, a company of English merchants asked King James I for the right to found or establish a settlement. In 1606, the king issued the first Virginia charter that gave the company permission to settle in a region called Virginia. So we're already starting to see that there's going to be like a charter is like a permission slip kind of thing, or like a permission opportunity to be able to go with the king's permission, basically, to go and create a settlement. So founding a new colony, the investors, so as soon as you see investors, we're already starting to kind of think about economic opportunities in here. Okay? So the investors in the new settlement formed the joint stock company called the Virginia Company of London. This enabled the group to share the cost and the risk of establishing a colony. Members of the England's growing middle class purchased stock in the company, hoping to earn money from their investment. The middle class is a social class between the upper class and working class. Now, we actually have a couple of things here. One, we have some economic stuff to talk about. And then two, we have probably like a social characteristic we can already start to unplug. So going into our notes, we're in the economics component. What I would recommend doing, these have underlines for some crazy reason, is I'm going to take those features off, the bolding and the underlining, to save space. I'm going to start using some dashes, or you can even use this bullet pointing stuff up here to separate things out. So first and foremost, the first settlement at Jamestown, I'm sorry, let me restart that. Middle class investors purchased stock in the Virginia Company and settlement in Jamestown. So this is an economic kind of environment. In other words, they're only going to Jamestown in order to essentially make money, and that's why it's an economic characteristic. We also had that the middle class, as a social characteristic, was growing in England at this time. Okay, so this is like a new social, kind of not a new, but like a growing group of social things that are happening. All right. So as far as I know, like right now, we can always double back if we feel like we missed anything. We are going to continue from this paragraph here. It says, on April 26, 1607, the first of 105 colonists sent by the Virginia Company arrived in America. On May 14th, about 40 miles up the James River in Virginia, the colonists founded Jamestown, the first permanent English settlement in North America. Most of the colonists hoped to find gold and get rich. Obviously, those are motives, right? That if we went back, right, we can add to the same exact point. Many of these investors hoped settlers would find gold and get rich. Basically, their attempt was to go there and find gold, and that's kind of a, I guess I'd call it a get rich quick kind of scheme. Okay. Others came looking for new opportunities in North America as cities in England were crowded and jobs were hard to find. So I'm going to make it as a second bullet point. Other settlers came to Jamestown in order to, and I think what I put here, to find other job opportunities. Because jobs in England were harder. Now, obviously, as you start to see these notes kind of string out, you can always kind of delete back and find the bullet pointing there. All right. So we're cruising along pretty good. If at any time you would need to pause and double check and look at something, obviously feel free to do that. I mean, there's no rule saying you have to see it all in one fell swoop. A lack of preparation and cost a lot of the colonists their lives. Most of the men who came to Jamestown were adventurers with no farming or useful skills, such as carpentry. Jamestown was surrounded by marshes full of disease-carrying mosquitoes. By the time winter arrived, 2/3 of the original colonists had died. Now, this is interesting because I know we didn't cover Roanoke this year, but ultimately they're starting to make some of the similar mistakes that people back at Roanoke here made. So Jamestown seems on the surface to be falling into the same pattern of failure that the previous colonists had found as well. Now, we also found what I would say is our first kind of geographic characteristic, and I just want to see if you can follow me along here. If you can see where my cursor is, it says Jamestown was surrounded by marshes full of disease-carrying mosquitoes. By the time winter arrived, 2/3 of the original colonists died. Here's Jamestown. This is a very small, very close-up view of it. One thing, remember, we're stereotyping information. So while Jamestown was surrounded by these marshes, it doesn't mean that there were marshes everywhere in the South, although there, with the South being what you're going to find a warm climate, it's definitely going to be something that could be a more commonplace in the South, more so than, let's say, New England counties that you're going to read about next. So I think we can stereotype this a little bit because we are going to specify that this is specific to Jamestown. So Jamestown was surrounded by marshes full of disease-carrying mosquitoes, which almost caused the settlement to fail. Now, keep in mind what we're doing here in this notes organizer, if you can recall my conversation from Monday, is we are doing this so that we can build a background amount of information that we can use to advertise for one of the regions. So if you choose, let's say, the Southern Colonies as a reason to advertise, at the end of this experience, I'm going to have you go in and highlight which characteristics are desirable, have them highlighted green or whatever positive color you want, maybe red, orange, or some other color that you might view as like undesirable. And basically, you're just going to start categorizing these. Like, is this great to have an area, certain areas of the South that are, surrounded by marshes full of disease-carrying mosquitoes? Probably not, which means it's probably going to be something you would use as maybe, you probably avoid that part, that characteristic in an advertisement. So far, so good. So we're cruising right along. All right, so now it's continuing on. Now, obviously, we just left off in this paragraph where a bunch of colonists, 2/3 of them died at the end of a winter, the first winter they arrived there. Now we're going to see what happens to kind of turn things around. So the Powhatan Confederacy, this is a subheading, page 69. It says, Jamestown fared better under John Smith, who took control of the colony and built a fort in 1608. He forced the settlers to work harder and build better housing by creating rules that rewarded harder workers with food. The colonists received help from the powerful Powhatan Confederacy of Native Americans after Smith made an agreement with them. The Powhatan traded food for tools and pots to help the colonists. They also taught the colonists how to grow food. So here we have what I would call the existence of kind of another, I think, important characteristic that maybe it kind of goes down to like maybe an other important kind of thing, like an important person. Obviously, I think we saw John Smith here. Okay. So I think John Smith is worth putting in here. And actually, I think we should take a look there and look at how did John Smith improve conditions at Jamestown. And I think if you take a look back at the reading, it does a pretty good job in this paragraph here where John Smith's name is bolded. And I think we should pull some of that knowledge out here and make that part of our study guide answer, because then we're going to get the double dip. We can put it in two, and then we can also copy and paste it and put it up in the other important kind of characteristics part. So I'm going to put that he helped build better housing and created rules that rewarded harder workers with food. And that's pretty much what they said in the text here as well, is that was kind of the main thing. You know, in addition, he also kind of helped create some negotiations with natives that helped them as well. So I'm going to just copy and paste that other, and instead of saying here he, I'm going to put John Smith. Help to build better housing. But down here, it makes sense to use the pronoun he because it's referring to, of course, you know, the question that's being asked. So now we kind of got a nice double dip here. We got one of the things we need for other important characteristics. So look at where we're already at now. We've already got, now these are our minimum requirements, and it's always better to do more than the minimum, okay? But in order to score decently well, you have to have at least the minimum. And again, the more background knowledge we build in here, the more we have to draw from when we get to our final project. Obviously, as far as the study guide questions are concerned, this is the priority, is just making sure for those quizzes that you have these things in order. So really, we kind of got two things, actually a bunch of things going on at once. We're identifying geographic stuff, we're identifying economic, social, and political characteristics, which we haven't quite jumped into yet, but we'll get there. And you know, we also have some study guide questions being completed as well. So we're doing good. In 1609, more settlers arrived in Jamestown. The Powhatan realized the colony would continue to expand. They started to view the settlers as invaders who would then take over their land. In the winter of 1609 and 1610, the Powhatan surrounded the Jamestown fort and killed anyone who tried to reach supplies outside. One thing they didn't do in this text, and it's kind of unfortunate because it's kind of an important part of the story, and other texts that I've used in the past have said this, but it was at this time, just prior to 1609 and 1610, that John Smith was forced to leave the colony because of an injury that he suffered. Now, let's go back to this paragraph real quick. And it says, he forced settlers to work harder to build better housing and created rules that rewarded harder workers with food. You can imagine that that made a lot of people upset. In fact, it made a lot of people upset, especially the ones that were kind of didn't really want to do the work to begin with, but yet felt that they deserved as much as everybody else. So he alienated a lot of people by making and enforcing this, I think, pretty important and pretty necessary rule, but not everybody appreciated it. And so some of them rebelled against him. And the theory is, they don't know this for a fact historically, that somebody sabotaged John Smith's gunpowder bag, and ultimately it exploded on his leg and it created some pretty serious burns, forced him to have to take a relief ship back to England, and that left Jamestown somewhat leaderless during this period of time where things started to hit the fan again. That winter, disease and famine also hit the colony. The colonists called this period the starving time. By the spring of 1610, only 60 colonists were still alive. Jamestown failed to make a profit until John Rolfe introduced a new type of tobacco that sold well in England. So again, there's a few parts of the story that are being skipped here. You know, John Smith leaves. A guy named Lord Delaware is going to come in, and he's going to kind of rescue the colony. But along with Lord Delaware is going to be another settler by the name of John Rolfe. Now let's take a look down here. We do have a question that involves John Rolfe in our study guide. And I'm pretty sure we just read the paragraph that what did he introduce a new type of? And this was actually a question that about 70% of kids on the pretest did pretty well. And it's a pretty simple answer. It's a one-word answer: tobacco. Now, I could copy and paste this up into, and I'm hoping you know what section we're talking about. Since it's a product that people are going to sell for a profit, it's going to be going up into the economics component. So John Rolfe developed a popular form of tobacco that helped Jamestown make a profit and therefore succeed. And notice I didn't just copy and paste the word tobacco up here, because if you do that, it's not going to make any sense, right? So to get that same sense for like what the question's kind of looking for down here, but turn it into something that's a little bit more user friendly, so that when we're looking at our notes, like, oh, I'm going to do a positive advertisement, like, hey, you can sell and grow and do the tobacco thing as a way to make money. This is something that might lure a lot of people in if I was going to advertise. And obviously that doesn't seem like a very appropriate school related thing to advertise, which is, hey, tobacco, let's sell tobacco for profit. But ultimately, from a historical standpoint, it literally was on the backs of tobacco, or with the help of tobacco seeds, that allowed Jamestown to start turning things around. Okay. All right, we're just about done. We got about 2 paragraphs left. We're only working up to the daily life in Virginia. So there's a little bit more, and there's something else that kind of fits in here. We're going to be looking for a social characteristic in this paragraph right here. War in Virginia. Okay, so this is like a blue subheading that would exist in the textbook as well. I know you can't see that from our PDF files, but War in Virginia. John Rolfe, the same guy that did this tobacco thing, John Rolfe married Pocahontas. Now, you may have seen the movie Pocahontas from Disney before, and in that movie, John Smith marries Pocahontas, but that is inaccurate and incorrect. In fact, if I believe Disney did it, they redid Pocahontas because there was quite a few inaccuracies, and they made a Pocahontas 2, and there they show John Rolfe, I believe, marrying Pocahontas. Anyway, John Rolfe marries Pocahontas, who happened to be the daughter of the Powhatan leader in 1614. Their marriage helped the colonists form more peaceful relations with the Powhatan. However, Pocahontas died 3 years later in England, where she was visiting with Rolfe. So there's something kind of important here, because as we read above, once John Smith was forced to leave the settlement, the relationships with Native Americans soured greatly. And it was not until John Rolfe marries Pocahontas that brings the relationship. And anytime we have things about relationships, it's probably going to go into our social characteristic. So we're going to give John Rolfe a little bit more credit than just the tobacco process. I'm going to look and see how you spell Pocahontas. I never get this right. Oh, yeah, there we go. Marry Pocahontas, which helped build a more positive relationship with the Powhatan natives. Now we got 2 characteristics out of our social aspects. So you can see we're almost, just in this one heading, we're almost halfway home to the minimum expectation. But like I said, it would be good if a vast majority of people were able to go above minimum. All right, last paragraph. In 1622, colonists killed the Powhatan leader. The Powhatan responded by attacking the Virginian settlers later that year. Fighting between the colonists and Powhatan continued for the next 20 years. Because the Virginia Company could not protect its colonists, the English crown canceled the company's charter in 1624. Virginia later became a royal county and existed under the authority chosen by a governor chosen by the king. This actually in here is going to be our first political characteristic, because it's dealing with who's in charge, who's going to be the one making rules. So up to this point, the charter gave the people at Jamestown the ability to kind of rule themselves. But in 1624, when things started hitting the fan between the settlers and the Powhatan natives, and things got to the point where they might not continue to succeed, the king stepped in and decided to cancel their charter and basically took over. So up until 1624, colonists had a charter to settle and made many of their own. However, when relations between natives and settlers got more dangerous, King of England, let's scroll down here, canceled that charter and Virginia became a royal colony. And what that means, being a royal colony, is that it basically, it meant that the king and government of England would be in charge of the settlement / colony from now on. Basically, up until 1624, things, they were kind of left to their own devices. Now, once this stuff all starts to continue to hit the fan, again, the relationship with the Native Americans is just kind of roller coastering up and down. And this is going to kind of set the tone. You're going to actually see this political theme pop up where charters get canceled, the king steps in, starts taking control and having a very tight reign over the Southern colonies in particular, which is going to play an important role later on when it comes to the American Revolution. A lot of the Americans living in the South remained loyal to the king up to that point, and those Southern colonies, while many people resisted and rebelled against the king, there were still quite a few what they would call loyalists that stuck true to staying in the king's favor and the government's favor. So we are starting to get pretty long in the tooth. I believe I've been recording for about 20 minutes. I hope this made sense. At the very least, I'm going to just reduce this in size a little bit so that you can kind of see what our notes look like just in this settlement in Jamestown red heading on the text. Now you can't see it's red, but it's the big heading. You do not need to go any further than this today. Wednesday, we are going to have you complete, and I'm going to go over this on Wednesday's video. We're going to complete the daily life in Virginia, which is a little bit shorter. And so it won't take nearly as long as this one. But I'm hoping that through this asynchronous day, you took the time to get the gist of it. You can also see there's 2 study guide questions that we completed as well that both found their ways up here. In fact, I'm not going to highlight them, but you can see them as you look through the notes. All right. Thank you very much for being a great audience. Please join me for office hours between 1:45 and 2:15 if this stuff didn't make sense even with the video. Hopefully the digital textbook is working. Let me double check here to see if as of 4 o'clock it is not for me. We'll see if there's another workaround. We still have people trying to work out some workarounds for this. So in the meantime, we will continue to post these things, the PDFs if need be. All right. Take care. We'll see you guys on Wednesday.